least, the distinguished chair of our House Subcommittee on Financial Institutions, Mr. Barr of Kentucky. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to our witnesses today for the good work that all of you all are doing. And Vice Chair Bowman, let me start with you, and I want to follow up the line of questioning from my colleague, the Vice Chair from Michigan, Mr. Heising, about the external review that you have commissioned. And you commissioned that review of the supervisory and bank management failures that led to the 2023 collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and other institutions. You cited the inadequacy of the Fed's previous internal review, led by your predecessor, Michael Barr, which was overly focused on non-core issues. The question I have is the consultant that you hired to conduct that external independent review, are they receiving the cooperation that they are owed by the regulators at the Fed?
My understanding is that several people have refused to be interviewed.
Okay, that's very troubling to me. Congress wants answers. We need, in a bipartisan way, this committee deserves answers, objective answers, about what were the true supervisory and bank management failures that led to the collapse of those institutions and the subsequent run on deposits. So just to confirm, you're telling me that regulators at the Fed have not been sufficiently responsive to the consultant's requests?
At this point, as far as I know, yes.
Okay. Well, let it be known at the Federal Reserve that Congress expects compliance with all requests from this consultant. That is our intention, and we applaud you for commissioning an independent external review of the supervisory failures that led to the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, especially at the San Francisco Fed. Let me move on to the importance of tailoring regulations. Vice Chair Bowman, when you last testified before this committee, you emphasized that indexing thresholds is critical, especially for community banks. That concern is one of the reasons why I introduced the Community Bank Regulatory Tailoring Act earlier this year. That bill updates outdated regulatory thresholds for community banks to reflect nominal GDP growth, preventing community banks and credit unions from facing higher regulatory burdens solely due to inflation and economic growth. Chairman Hill likewise recognized the importance of this issue by including this Community Financial Institution indexing in the Main Street Capital Access Act. Question, Vice Chair Bowman, do you agree that updating in statute these thresholds to reflect inflation and economic growth is necessary to ensure community banks and credit unions are regulated based on their actual risk profiles, while also allowing regulators to better target supervisory resources toward institutions and activities that pose the greatest risks to the financial system?
I think it would be very helpful to have a statute that indicated that there should be an increase in the thresholds as well as an ongoing indexing, yes.
And the committee, on to Basel III, the committee has welcomed the Fed's efforts to incorporate bipartisan feedback and move toward a more balanced bank capital framework. I think your reproposal deserves a lot of credit for inviting banks back into mortgage lending and servicing. We do have an affordability crisis in housing in this country, but as the chairman pointed out in his opening statement, it's not just about inadequate supply. That's a problem with affordability, but it's also about mortgage lending and deployment of capital. The proposal represents a significant improvement in this regard, ensuring that capital requirements are appropriately tailored to risk without unnecessarily restricting lending. In your view, why is it important that capital requirements be carefully calibrated to risk, and what effect can an overly restricted capital standards have on the ability of Americans to access critical financing, especially in the housing market?
So what we saw from the original Dodd-Frank regulations, or the regulations that were written to support Dodd-Frank, One, it improved capital in the banking system exponentially, but it also pushed a lot of activity outside of the banking system that was traditional, safe and sound banking activity. So what we've done through our capital proposals is to try to bring that activity back inside the regulatory perimeter so that banks can engage in traditional banking activities in ways that are not.
Really quickly to Comptroller Gould, the OCC's recent rulings on preemption are very important. You've said that preemption isn't a big bank versus small bank issue, that even community banks benefit because there's no longer limited by arbitrary geographies. Quickly, can you speak to how defending a uniform framework advances a competitive environment for banks?
Yes, sir. It allows more banks to compete with one another by creating nationwide markets in which they can compete on even terms.
Mr. Barr, your time has expired.